What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the vlog. Doing this intro a little bit different because I've actually just completed my session. I was at home grading some student projects, and as I was finishing up, I opened up the Bravo Poker app, and I noticed Orange City had 21 tables running, including 11 tables of 1-2. So I looked into it a little bit, and they were doing their big-ass high hand promotion, where they were giving away thousands of dollars in these 4-hour blocks. Some of them were $2,000 blocks, some of them were $5,000 blocks, plus the regular $200 high hands. So I hadn't planned on playing. I had planned on playing tomorrow, but then I realized with everybody up here tonight, no one's going to be here tomorrow. So I thought I'd come up and play a little bit. If you remember from the previous vlog, I just suffered my biggest loss of my poker career. I had some bad luck, I had a bad beat, and I also played really bad. That really sad, really defeated feeling lasted for about a day or so. And then, I realized after going back and recapping some of the hands that there were just some mistakes I made. And so I took that information, I processed it. So now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to try to have a good session. I don't really give a shit about the high hand stuff. High hands are always just a bonus, but with all these tables running, there's got to be some action in this room. So I'm going to go in there, or actually I just got out of there, and try to get some of that action. How did it go? Let's find out. It doesn't take long for us to get in the mix. As the third hand in the big blind, we look down at ace-king suited. There's a call from under the gun, and +1 raises to $20. The action folds around to me. I think there's definitely merits to making a raise being out of position, but I like the idea of calling as well so I can get in for cheap and hopefully bring along the under the gun player as well. She does in fact make the call, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 8-king-4 with 2 clubs. I check and under the gun checks, +1 leads out for $25. It gets back to me, and this is where I decide I want to start building a pot, and so I put in the old check raise for $75. Under the gun folds, and +1 shoves his stack for $150 total. Well, looks like it's not going to take us very long to get in the mix. I go ahead and make the call and say let's run it. With $360 in the pot, the turn is the 8 of diamonds. The river is the 2 of clubs, kind of a scary card because it brings in the front door flush. I flip over my hand and he flips over ace-queen, so 3 hands in and we've got a double up. There's a button straddle to $5. We're in the cutoff and we look at 4-5 of clubs. There's 2 calls. I go ahead and make the call as well, and the button checks his option, so we're off to see a flop. The flop is a pretty good one. It is deuce-7-king all clubs. The action checks to me and I bet $10. The under the gun player calls and everyone else folds, so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is a 5 of diamonds, and once again my opponent checks over to me. My opponent only has about $85 in his stack, but I don't think I can get him to commit the entire thing right now. Instead, I think I'm better off making a smaller bet to try to make it look like maybe I'm on some sort of pair plus flush draw combo, and so I bet $25. My opponent calls. I feel any safe river card I can go ahead and jam and get the rest of his stack, so with about $90 in the middle, we're off to the river. The river is an action-killing 8 of clubs. He checks it over to me. I go ahead and just check behind because I don't think any worse hands will call me. He flips over king 10 and we scoop this pot in our direction. It's been 15 minutes and I'm already up $240. Hands are happening so fast I can barely get the notes in my phone. There's 2 other small pots that I played well and I won both with bluffs, but I couldn't even record the info on my phone because hands were moving so fast and I was busy stacking chips. This time there's an under the gun straddle to $5. I'm in the big blind and I look down at queen 8 offsuit. It folds all the way around to the button who calls. The small blind folds. I make the call and the straddler checks their option, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is king queen 6. I check to the straddler who's been very passive, but she leads out for $10. The button calls and I call as well, so we're off to a turn. The turn is a jack, so ace 10 gets there. The action actually checks all the way through, so that card may have scared people. I'm going to keep that in mind going to the river. The river is a 7 of hearts. I go ahead and lead out on this card for $16, about 1/3 pot, but they both end up folding and we scoop this small one our way. I'm noticing 2 things as play goes on. 1, there's a straddle almost every hand, And 2, the table is very passive post-flop. I've been taking down a bunch of small pots on the flop and on the turn. I haven't had to show anything in a while and have even won some hands with complete air, just playing the texture of the board. I don't have to worry much about board texture or bluffing in this next hand because we're in the button and we look down at pocket kings. There are 3 limpers before it gets to me and I bump it up to $15. Under the gun calls and the cutoff calls as well, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is Ace 6 7 with 2 spades. The action checks to me, and again, the table's been so passive post-flop that I can definitely apply some pressure and represent the ace with a bet. So that's what I do, and I lead out for $45. The under the gun player with the big stack looks like he wants to make the call, but he ends up folding, as does the cutoff, so we take another hand down. In the next hand, we're in the big blind, and we look down at 10-6 offsuit. There are 3 callers, and I check my action, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 10-7 deuce. I lead out on this flop for $10. Only the cutoff calls, and so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is a jack. I go ahead and check my action, as does my opponent, so we're off to the river for free. The river is a 10 of spades, so this brings in the front door flush. I check, and the cutoff bets $20. I hate this river as it brings in the flush, but my opponent is a very competent 2-5 player, and I know he's capable of making a move. I don't think there's any need to raise here, as no worse hand is going to call me, so I go ahead and just make the call. He flips over Queen 8 for air, and so I'm going to scoop this one as well. I'm back from a bite to eat, and the giant stack that was in seat 1 is gone, and the passive woman has moved over to his seat. There are 2 new players directly to my left who appear to be a little bit more aggressive. We're in the big blind when we look down at King-Queen offsuit. The under the gun player bumps the action up to $10, plus 1 calls, the button calls, and the small blind calls as well. This is the perfect position to put a squeeze bet in. There's really no other action except to make the raise, but for whatever reason I don't, and I just end up making the call. There's mistake number 1. We're off to a flop. The flop is King 10-8 with 2 clubs, so I've got a pretty good piece of this. I go ahead and check my action looking for the pre-flop raiser to put out a bet, but he doesn't. And in fact, no one does. It checks through, so we're off to the turn. There's mistake number 2. The turn is a 7 of hearts, so it brings a second flush draw on the board. I've got to put in a bet now to protect my hand and build a pot in case I'm ahead. So I put a bet out for $35. Under the gun calls and everyone else folds, so we're off to a river out of position, heads up. The river is an 8 of diamonds. Both flush draws have missed. I do have to be a little bit weary of Jack 9 though. I put out a bet for $65. Under the gun thinks about it, and then he shoves for $214. This is the second time he's done this to one of my bets in the last 5 minutes or so. Jack 9 did get there on the turn, but I didn't get re-raised on the turn, so I'm not going to put him on that. I'm actually getting pretty decent pot odds to call. 149 to win about 390, so I'm getting better than 3 to 1. I hate this spot and really wish I had put the squeeze on pre-flop, but because the math tells me to do so, I go ahead and make the call, and he flips over pocket 7s for the boat. So, to recap what I didn't do right, I should have 3-bet pre-flop, and I should have bet the flop. It's a frustrating situation because I had chances to take control of this hand, and I didn't. Would he fold to a 3-bet pre-flop? Maybe not. Would he call a flop bet? Probably not. It's just a reminder of why I don't like to slow play hands. You give people the chance to catch up for free. We're in late position when we look down at pocket 8s. There's a call from under the gun and a middle position player, and I bump the action up to $8. I'm mixing up my raise sizes every once in a while just to keep my opponents guessing on what I have. Only under the gun calls, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is Jack 5-6. The action checks through, so we're off to a turn. The turn is a 9. My opponent checks to me, and I bet out for $15. She then check raises to $30, so a min click. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but it's only $15 more, so I go ahead and make the call, and we're off to see a river. The river is a blank that doesn't change anything. The action checks through, I table my hand, and she shows 7-9. Nice hand. There's a button straddle to $5. I'm in under the gun plus 2, and I look down at 10-9 suited. There's 1 caller before the action gets to me, and I bump it up to $20. The straddler calls and the big blind calls, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is Ace Deuce 5. I want to lead out here, but there's still action to be had behind me, so I check. Everybody else checks, so we're off to a turn. The turn is a 4, brings a 4-liner to the straight, and once again the action checks through, so we're off to a river. The river is a blank, it doesn't change anything, and for a third time the action checks to me. No one has shown much interest in this pot. The button is a very passive player, so I might actually be able to take this down with a bet. So, I bet out for $45. They both end up folding, and I scoop this pot. We're in the big blind now. We look down at 5-8 of diamonds. There's 7 people at the table, and we're all in this hand, so it's a family pot, 7 ways to the flop. The flop is deuce 6-3 with 2 spades. It checks to the cutoff, who leads out for $5. Everybody at the table makes a call, so still 7 ways, we're off to a turn. The turn is a 9 of diamonds, so I've picked up an inside straight draw and a flush draw. It checks to the button, who leads for $20. I'm the only caller in this situation, so we're off to a river, heads up. The river is a jack of diamonds bringing in my flush. I only have about $125 in front of me, but I know she's not going to call an overbet jam. She's way too tight of a player to do that. So instead, I bet out on the river for $75. She's really contemplating a call. She actually counts the call out, but she ends up folding her hand, and we win this one. In the last hand of the night, there's another button straddle to $5. We're in middle position, and we look down at Queen 10 of clubs. There's 2 callers before it gets to me, and I decide to go ahead and put the squeeze in, and I raise to $25. Both the straddler and both blinds end up calling, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is Queen King King. It checks to the big blind, who shoves for her last $39. I don't really care for a spot like this, but at that price I really don't think I can afford to fold, so I end up making the call, and everyone else folds, so with $178 in the middle, we're off to a run out. The turn is a 6, shouldn't change anything. The river is an ace. My opponent flips over Jack 10 of hearts for the rivered straight. The table was really starting to tighten up, and some of the action players had left, so I decided to go ahead and call it a night. So that will wrap up the session. What a weird night. Obviously, ace king in the third hand, and I get pretty much a full double up. And then after that, the table got really passive post-flop, and I was able to take a lot of hands down, just, playing the board texture and representing straights and representing flushes. It was all happening so fast, I couldn't keep up with the notes in my phone. There are definitely hands where I made really great, post-flop and turn bets that I didn't have time to jot it down because the table was playing, really, really fast. Obviously, with the king-queen hand, I should have squeezed. I'm punching myself and kicking myself for not doing that. Would it have got the guy next to me to fold pre-flop? Maybe not. Oops. But then post-flop, when I flop, top pair, I should have bet it. Facing that raise under the gun, I figured he might take a stab at it, and I let him catch up for free, and then I ended up getting my money in bad. I've never played at a table that's had so many straddles, both from the button and under the gun, and I've never seen so much pre-flop squeezing. I have never seen so many pots going, or at least people trying to get pots to go $20 and $25 and $30 pre-flop. The action was just insane. And so the first, 45 minutes was really good. Then it slowed down a little bit. Then I had that hand with the king queen versus sevens. Then I got some money back, and then I had the hand where the girl, I wasn't crazy about that hand, and she rivers the straight. So it was just a really bizarre night. But, small loss isn't that bad. It actually helps boost the confidence a little bit. When you punt off $600 a couple days before, losing under $100 isn't so bad. So we were into tonight's game for $250. We were out for $182. So just under a $70 loss. Again, even though it's a loss, it's a little bit of a confidence builder. And so I'll go back and I'll review these hands, and I'll figure out where I made my mistakes. I know I limped a lot of suited connectors tonight. There were a lot of hands from the button. There were, 7-8 and 5-6 where I should have been raising, and I don't know why. I couldn't pull the trigger with suited and unsuited connectors raising pre-flop, and that's stupid. Those are hands I should be raising, especially in position. And so I've got some things to go back and review to make myself a better poker player. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm distribute this video to other people who also may enjoy the content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker. We'll see you next time.